Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
Do you need an aging forward who can barely contribute? Do you need a defensive defenseman that you won't even notice is on the ice? Backup goalie, face-offs, power play goals. Just kidding. You want it, we got it. Everything must go.
Did you say power play goals?
Yeah, and then I said just kidding.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure because you're gonna get hit for some. That'll be our first official complaint to the SEC. I don't know, FEC. I don't know who's in charge. Yeah, FEC. What am I saying?
FCC.
FCC. Yeah, well.
FCC won't let me be.
The right before this game started, that's 10 minutes left in it right now. Detroit's down 4-1 to Nashville. This is Bernier's first game back, and I was like, this is absolutely a showcase. Put Bernier in right away. And I was like, hey, a strong game tonight, a strong game on Saturday against Carolina. That's a great showcase for Bernier if he can put up together two good starts. Yeah, there are very few Red Wings who have been good tonight.
I think we can count them on two fingers.
If you're thinking this is putting a damper on the trade deadline overall, welcome to the vibe of this year's NHL Trade Deadline. Yet another thing ruined by COVID. But yes, welcome to this season's trade deadline preview episode where we are going to recap the Red Wings, their trade, I guess not trade targets, trade bait for them, who might get moved for how much, who's going to stay, that kind of thing. We'll take a look around the league as well before jumping into overtime where you offer your questions. And we also took in some comments from Twitter as well to see who had some interesting trade proposals. But without further ado, the Winged Wheel Podcast. I'm Ryan Hanna.
I'm not actually an infomercial salesman, Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
I think Brad could actually make a living being an infomercial salesman. 100%.
Absolutely, I could.
Now's the time to try.
I don't know why you're spending all your energy on, I don't know. Fatherhood, I guess, is what you spend all your energy on. Actually, that's a worthy cause. That's a terrible thing to say. You're raising two kids who are substantially better than you, and that's a great cause. But you know what else you could also do is deposit some of your annoying, 130% at all times energy into, ads. Although I would definitely never put the radio on in my car again if there's a chance I could hear your voice.
If I need to deposit my energy into anything right now, it's not ads, it's Evan.
Gross.
Feel sorry for everyone.
And it's 5-1 Nashville.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I didn't want to know that.
We got him right where we want him.
Before we jump into the thick of it on the Winged Wheel Podcast today, I do want to talk about something we've mentioned over the past few episodes, which is that we've partnered with the Jamie Daniels Foundation to help further their cause. It's a fantastic initiative that we're proud to get on board with and spread the message for. The more we talk about substance use disorder, the faster we can end the stigma and get support to those in need. The Jamie Daniels Foundation, a children's foundation initiative, was established in memory of Jamie Daniels and founded by Jamie's father and Red Wings lead announcer, none other than Ken Daniels, and Jamie's mother, Lisa Daniels Goldman. The foundation strives to end the stigma of substance use disorder and provide support to those struggling with the disease or who are in recovery. To learn more and support the Jamie Daniels Foundation, visit jamiedanielsfoundation.org. All right. Trade deadline 2021. The Detroit Red Wings have about 1,000 players for sale. Essentially, no one is untouchable other than Larkin, Raymond, and Seider, if you are to believe the talking heads. Some might include Zadina in that list, but still, that gives you perspective. Anything is on the board. Call me crazy, but the overall vibe I'm getting from the NHL is that this is going to be an especially disappointing deadline.
Evgeny Svechnikov cleared waivers, so teams could have got a depth forward for free at basically league minimum and went, nah. That was my first red flag of, yeah, I don't think much is going to happen. Now, that's not to say nothing will happen, because if you look at the Florida-Chicago trade from today, trades can happen, but it's going to be more of a money in, money out situation versus your traditional X player for pick. there are teams who literally can't take on a player at league minimum right now, so they would have to send a player back, or else they can't make a trade, quite literally speaking. So there's going to be a bit more to it, and God knows NHL GMs are notoriously stingy with stuff like this. It takes them 4 months to hammer out a fourth line center for a 4th round pick trade. They're not like the NBA where, oh, this player demands a trade. 3 days later, there's a 17 player trade between 4 teams. Like, the NHL doesn't work that way. So throwing even a small wrinkle in like this, I shouldn't say small wrinkle, but a wrinkle in like this where, yeah, you'd love to trade, hypothetically, a Luke Glendening for a 3rd round pick, but the team that's acquiring him can't just take on his contract, even if Detroit retains half. Now you have to work out who's the player that's coming back, and are the Red Wings willing to pay it? Is it a player that they really need off their roster? So on and so forth. So it's not going to be dead, but given that the Red Wings have, 11 pending UFAs, I'll be pretty content if 25% of them are moved. North of 25%, I'll say.
This is a buyer's market. Prices are going to be low. The questions here for Yzerman and the Red Wings are going to be, do we absolutely want to sell these guys at any cost? How much am I willing to use all this abundance of cap space? I think the 2nd most in the league behind New Jersey right now. And how desperate are we to add picks for the 2021 draft? That's primarily what teams are going to be looking to move. They're probably going to push 2021 just because of the volatility and the, relative underscouting of this draft. They're going to want to maintain their 2022 picks. That's not going to be a hard line, but that's probably what you're going to see more of. It's a tough balance. We're going to get into the specifics of player by player, but I think we're going to run into situations where players who have a ton of value, who might get interest in future years, let's say Mantha for the extreme end of that scale, you're going to probably see, unless someone comes completely out of left field here, he's not going to get moved because Yzerman's going to hold on to him until the price is right, which is probably going to coincide with Mantha hopefully playing better. But if you have a Luke Glendening or a Darren Helm or a Mark Stahl, guys on expiring deals where that's bottom line depth or bottom 6, bottom pairing depth, you move them for whatever. You take whatever you can get. You're not hanging on to the Mark Stahl if you have an offer, even if it's for a 6th or a 7th. You're not hanging on to Darren Helm if you have an offer, even if it's for a late round pick. So it's a fine line to walk. I think 25% would be ambitious. Honestly, if we see more than one guy moved, I'd be impressed. Nashville just scored on a penalty shot at 6-1.
Oh my God.
Dangerous lead in hockey.
And further to Ryan's point with guys like Mantha and Bertuzzi possibly being traded, or the unlikelihood of that, is we have another complication to this year's trade deadline, and that is the expansion draft. So any player who is on a contract beyond just this season, now that's another body that you have to consider for protection in the expansion draft. So if you trade for a Tyler Bertuzzi or an Anthony Mantha, you're obviously going to protect them beyond this season, but then that means someone's getting bumped off your protection list that otherwise wouldn't have been there. So not only are you trading the assets that you're giving up for the player, so let's say if it's Mantha, they give up a 1st round pick and a prospect, so you're losing those 2 things, but you're losing another player that you probably wouldn't have in the expansion draft. Now, that's not to say you wouldn't have lost a player anyway. It'll just be a slightly better player, depending on your team structure. So the one advantage the Red Wings have in the trade deadline this year is this is kind of a throwback and not quite what last year was. This is a year for pure rentals because teams don't want to worry about the expansion draft. They don't want long-term dollars and a flat cap. They don't want to deal with that stuff unless they are literally just coming into their cup window and they're like, whatever, we need players. But even those teams are a little hesitant. So yeah, the Bobby Ryans, the Luke Glendenings, the Jonathan Berniers of the world, they have appeal now because if you're Colorado and you trade for Jonathan Bernier, you're not going to lose him in the expansion draft because he's a UFA anyway and you still protect Grubauer. So that is the only advantage the Red Wings have going into this deadline, but it's not a nothing advantage.
All right. Well, let's jump into it. Let's go through player by player on the Red Wings, and we'll discuss, are these guys going to get moved? What would the return look like? And what's our prediction on, whether or not they actually get traded, that kind of thing. This is a tough one. Dylan Larkin not being moved.
No, not unless it's for Jack Eichel.
Yeah, carry on not being traded.
I could see them getting a 7th for him.
They could probably pull that together. I think we can rely on Yzerman to finesse a 7th out of a team.
Like you're talking 7th overall for a couple of years, right?
Yeah, like 2 7th overall picks. Anthony Mantha, and I think that's a good, interesting one to start on here.
Okay, so prediction, no, I don't think he gets moved. If he does, we've talked about it at length. It's going to be for 2 premium assets and a filler. That's my guess. So mid to late first round pick, a team's 1 or 2 prospect, and then a kicker, not of any consequence.
Yeah. Mantha is on the market. Whether or not people are fond of trading him and whether or not people like me think right now is the right time to trade him based on how he's playing, he is on the market. I think there's an outside chance. I'd probably put that at arbitrary number 10% here. It's not very high. It pretty much just depends on, how spicy Mark Bergevin's feeling that day. I just don't see it happening. Keep an eye on it for future years, though. But yeah, I completely agree on your return for value, or at least that's kind of what you would hope for. If Mantha does move, I don't know. I think that'd be a big swing from Yzerman.
That'd be a big trade given where we are with COVID and how teams haven't really been wanting to spend any money. So I would be shocked if he's traded at the trade deadline. I feel like a trade would have already materialized because he's the type of guy you want comfortable in a new environment, and you don't want him 2 weeks before playoffs start. Like, you need to get him in there sooner rather than later. So I'll say 5%, but crazier things have happened.
Yeah. Honestly, for anything where we say might get traded, but just not right now based on the timing, we might be having this conversation again in a few months come draft time. I think a lot of the volume of trades that have happened or would typically happen at trade deadline are going to get moved to the draft here. Next forward on the list here, Darren Helm. This is one where if they get an offer, which I don't think they do, be based on how few players are going to get sold at the deadline, if they get an offer, they have to take it. Last year of his contract, I doubt he gets re-signed. He's open to going elsewhere, so I think he knows he's going to probably have to look around at free agency. It's the end of an overpayment of a contract for him. He's had good service in Detroit, of course, but if they can get Ken Holland or someone like that to give up like a 5th or a 6th, it's not much, but it's a free asset. I don't think Darren Helm's returning to this team after the season regardless.
If Darren Helm gets traded at the deadline, that'll be Yzerman's biggest miracle, honestly, because like we talked about earlier, Darren Helm's got a $3.8 million cap hit. So even if the Red Wings retain half, he's going for 1.9, and there are not a lot of teams that can absorb that. And that's not even factoring in that he's barely an NHL level player anymore. So I put the chances of Darren Helm getting traded at 1%, and that 1% is just if Ken Holland's feeling nostalgic when he acquires Luke Glendening.
Yeah, when you have 6 points in 30 odd games, don't know how big of a market there is for you. So unless a team gets really desperate and other teams' players are jumping off the board, which none of us, I think, expect to happen, then I don't see how a Darren Helm trade materializes.
No, and he doesn't even have the intangibles anymore that Luke Glendening still has. Glendening's at least got his face-offs, and he's at least good on the cycle, even if he can never get the puck to the slot. Helm's lost most of his speed, and he's the anchor on one of the league's worst penalty kills. So the things that Darren Helm legitimately and was great at, he can't even say that anymore about him, unfortunately. Whereas a guy like Glendening, where we'll talk about, still does to an extent.
I think those are tangible things that Glendening has. I think all Darren Helm does have is intangibles.
Yeah, honestly.
Good guy in the room, general air of I mean, he's a great dude. He's been well loved in Detroit for a good reason for a long time, but it's the end of the road. The contract's probably not getting picked up. I can see a crazy world where just to get a warm body for one reason or another, not that I agree that it should happen or that it's even likely, maybe he gets picked up on veteran minimum for a year. I doubt it, but the general rule is here. If someone's giving you something for the rest of Darren Helm this year and they want you to retain half the salary, you take it. I think the same thing goes for Valtteri Filppula, even if not more. He has an 8-team no trade list right now. I think it is 7 or 8 teams. He's not getting moved. He's been scratched a lot of this year. Plain and simple.
No, not an NHL level player anymore.
Vlad Namestnikov. I don't think so. I haven't heard a lot about it, but you know what? It wouldn't be a bad move for some teams. I know Toronto was in on Namestnikov when he was a free agent.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. Can the Red Wings even trade him? Isn't he like one or two veteran players the Red Wings need to keep to expose to the expansion draft?
I'm not even considering expansion draft here because I know how bare thin it is to try to meet those requirements. So yeah, probably. And for that reason, they won't.
And that being said, he's been not that great this year. He's been adequate. It's probably the polite way to put it. He's been quintessential guy. And given that he does have another year left on his contract, I don't see teams tripping over themselves to get Namestnikov right now.
All right, let's look to the Red Wings' probably most likely candidate to move, Luke Glendening.
Yeah.
Face-off extraordinaire, quintessential third, fourth line grinder, great reputation around the league. Like this is a coach's player. If you have a coach who has a ton of skilled players but seems to be playing one guy who's not a skilled player but just works his butt off, that's Luke Glendening. That is just who he is. That's not a bad thing. I think Red Wings fans do a really good job of appreciating Luke Glendening for what he is and understand that he's been put in positions that he should never be put in. It's not his fault that he's played more minutes in the top 6 than he ever should have over the past few years. But honestly, that guy gives it 120% every shift. He's like the Energizer Bunny out there, wins faceoffs at a crazy rate this year. All stuff where in a normal year, I could see a team overpaying for him. I just don't know if they'll do that this year.
Yeah, Luke Glendening's probably the one asset the Red Wings have, which we can, if we're using business terms, it's an inflated asset because he's going to get more than he's worth. And Ryan's right about everything he just said about Luke Glendening. Luke Glendening is so unbelievably easily replaced in the NHL these days that I'm shocked he's as hot of a trade candidate as he is. You know, I've been saying for the last 2-3 years, even when he had term left on his contract, I'm like, if we get a 4th round pick for him, like you do it. You're crazy if you don't. And now we're talking there's an outside chance he gets a 2nd, which is amazing. You know, you don't get the face-offs with any other player, but again, depending on how important you think face-offs are, it might not matter all that much because,
well, coaches think face-offs are important, and that's why Glendening's a hot target.
No, and honestly, you're absolutely right. And who was it? I want to say it was Jonathan Willis, one of the Oilers athletic writers, did a breakdown because Ken Holland made it clear he wanted a right shot depth centerman. So the 3 candidates that kept getting tossed around were Brandon Sutter, Derek Ryan, and Luke Glendening. And so he did a breakdown on all 3 players, and within like 4 sentences, he's like, and by now you can tell Luke Glendening should not be a candidate. So coming from an unbiased observer who would be acquiring this, he's like, yeah, this is not an impactful player in just about any way outside of the faceoff dot. So the intangibles are great, and we all love Luke Glendening. He was a walk-on at Michigan. How could he not be one of your favorite Red Wings? You're an asshole if he's not one of your favorite Red Wings. But honestly, a 4th line grinder who barely contributes offensively and wins faceoffs, a dime a dozen. So if they get anything above a 4th round pick for him, it's a home run.
At this point, I'm just hoping that Glendening's like hot streaks or reputation from previous years where he's been able to do a little bit more offensively, not a lot. I don't think he's ever been like a top 6 player at all. But he might be skating on some reputation from previous years and coupling that with the faceoffs from this year. And I'm not even trying to be funny here. The NHL loves familiarity. Like Stan Bowman just trading for former Blackhawks isn't like, it's not an exclusive attribute in the NHL. Like GMs and coaches love players that they know. Ken Holland, it very much fits into that old school mold. He would love to have Luke Glendening back. Like he knows for a fact he'd love to have Luke Glendening back. And it doesn't matter what the analytics say or what his actual performance is. He's thinking, I have Connor McDavid. I have Leon Draisaitl. I have superstar forwards who can put in the goals. I'm not worried about more goals. I'm worrying about a guy who can get out there and shut down the play. Can Luke Glendening do that consistently and to help in a playoff run? I don't know. I think he'd have to have a pretty hot playoff streak, but this is just what Ken Holland might be thinking.
Yeah, you have an old school an old school coach and an old school GM with that, old school mentality. This would be a perfect storm of getting a first round pick for Luke Glendening any other year. But Edmonton is the prime target for him. But the catch-22 is they don't have their second or third round pick this year, which is probably what Yzerman's fishing for. He might be happy to kick that can into 2022. I know Yzerman would be happy to do that. But the Oilers are pick poor overall, so I don't know if Holland's going to want to just unload even more picks. So they've got a surplus of young defensemen, so maybe there's a trade there. And don't get me wrong, the Oilers are not the only team looking at Luke Glendening. There are a lot of teams kicking tires on him right now. So not that there's going to be a significant bidding war, but yeah, this is the quote unquote perfect storm for a fourth line center. He's having an abnormally high year in the faceoff circle, carries a good reputation, shoots right. And here we are.
Yeah, I think a fantastic return. Understanding that Holland and Edmonton don't really want to get rid of more picks, so add prospect equivalence to this. Somewhere around a third round pick in value, I'd be thrilled. A fourth or fifth, I think, is more reasonable if he does get sold, just because prices are going to be low. I give it a little better than a coin flip that Glendening gets moved. And I think that's the best odds I would give for any Red Wings player.
I think Glendening's chances of getting moved are north of 80%.
You're that confident?
Everybody I have read, everyone is positive he's getting moved, whether it's a Detroit writer or a national writer. Glendening is in demand. He's the only Red Wing who we can say is in demand. There's two other guys that I think are going to get a significant number of phone calls, whether or not that leads to anything. But no, I'll be shocked if Luke Glendening's not traded. Now that I said this, after the game, they're going to break news that he just signed a 2-year contract extension, but because I know how this works, but we'll see.
He's taking the captaincy from Larkin.
Larkin does get moved for a seventh. Evan was right.
I told you. I wasn't just spewing that out. I was telling you facts.
What did someone say? They commented after last episode. You guys need to double Evan's pay. He has more insight. He has more insight than both of you put together. Give me a break. Was
that one of my burner accounts?
Evan, nobody will ever believe you have a burner account. You barely tweet from your actual account.
I'm the perfect person to have one then.
It's the first day of the Masters, and he's barely tweeted about that. I actually wonder if Evan knows where his phone is, and the only reason he ever tweets is because he's at his computer. Evan, be honest. Do you know where your phone is?
Yeah, it's right here beside me.
Yeah, it's playing out. Who is it? Justin Rose's swing on loop all day, so he can figure it out.
Yeah, I wish. I wouldn't be talking to you, chumps.
I texted Evan earlier today. I was like, I can't stop laughing every time Bryson DeChambeau drives the ball. It's the same vibes as Mark Stahl teeing up a piss missile right into the post from the top of the circles. The dude just mashes that thing.
Bryson does this thing on the range where he literally will just rapid fire drives for a minute. And did you see the thing with VJ?
Yeah. That was so good.
Bryson does that at every tournament. He just goes out for one of the practice range sessions and just hammers drives. He'll do 15 or 20 in a minute. It's just ridiculous.
VJ's whatever I was juicing with was not good enough. Look at this guy.
Yeah, just a meat stick.
All right. Evan, very quickly, your quick odds on whether or not Glendening gets moved.
I think he gets moved. I think I'm somewhere on a coin flip because I just don't know what's going on this year. He's cheap. He works hard. A lot of old school coaches like him. teams are desperate for depth with all the uncertainty of guys getting COVID. So he would be a prime candidate for me if I was trying to add at the deadline.
And I think something...
And the one thing, too, that we haven't even mentioned yet that we mentioned 3 months ago would be important for the trade deadline, it's that a lot of Red Wings got their vaccination this week, which is going to put a lot of teams' minds at ease when acquiring these players.
Yeah, and considering Edmonton as the most likely target for Glendening, the federal government in Canada agreed to reduce the NHL's COVID waiting period from 14 days to 7. So that greatly reduces the amount of games missed as well. So eases a lot of teams. And I think that's why Eric Stahl agreed to be traded to Montreal. 14 days wasn't good for him, but 7 he could work with. And something to remember for anyone who we've talked about and anyone who's going to come up here, we're likely going to talk about, return or value in terms of draft picks, just because that's a good baseline. It's not that they're uncommon, like straight player for pick trades, but a lot of the times you're going to see things like, little tweaks and balances, like partial salary retained or a 7th coming back, or, this prospect that's equivalent to this 6th because they're not going anywhere, but they're good for your AHL team, that kind of thing. So if I say a third, I mean a third or a third equivalent in value.
Yeah, like talking about Glendening, and we were talking about a second-round pick from Edmonton, to stick with Edmonton. If we traded Luke Glendening for Tyler Benson, who was a former second-round pick from the Oilers and still is a decent prospect, cool. That's the equivalent of a second-round pick.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move through some guys here. Adam Ernie, I don't think.
I would if I was Detroit because his value is never going to be higher. But like I talked about an episode or two ago, he's also a candidate that, hey, the Red Wings have 11 UFAs at the end of the season. They got to bring some guys back. So Ernie's one of the guys I'd be very okay with if they're like, screw it, we'll re-sign him. We need bodies next year.
Yeah, RFA with Arbright. He'll come in cheap. If someone wants to offer, great, but I just don't think the market will be that hot this year where we're going to get down to the Adam Ernie part of the barrel. But hey, if they do, I'd take it. Absolutely.
For sure.
Philip Zadina.
No.
My thoughts, generally untouchable because the price would be so high. I think, 21-year-old, getting better every game, probably Detroit's second best player on the ice right now, if not the best some nights, with Bertuzzi out, Mantha doing whatever he's doing this season. And it's pretty much Larkin and Zadina out there doing the best every game. Mantha's been, he's not been bad, but he's not been as good as Zadina, I don't think, relative to their talent levels. So yeah, the price is set sky high on it. I don't think he's actually untouchable. I don't think Yzerman won't listen, but this isn't a trade market where Zadina's getting moved.
No, and Zadina too, you'd be selling low. I mean, he's played way beyond what his counting stats show. Like, he is the most snake-bitten Red Wing. He's had set up his teammates for 1 million point-blank chances that they haven't scored. And his shooting percentage, I think, is hovering somewhere just south of 5%, and he was a 13% shooter last year. So if he held last year's shooting percentage, he's in double digits for goals this year right now, which would put him first on the team. So yeah, it's even if Zadina's on the market, now is not the time.
Michael Rasmussen is someone who I don't think teams are going to be paying for or who would have value for right now. And honestly, I don't really know why the Red Wings would move him unless someone overpaid. You're not moving Rasmussen at this point for, what he's worth based on his play, which is, I don't know, 4th, 5th. You're not doing that. And a team's not really paying for more than that. He's a 21-year-old, remove his draft stock from the conversation. They're still trying to develop him into something of a regular player in the NHL. So I don't think he's on the board. Evgeny Svechnikov. So between last episode and now, it came out that Evgeny Svechnikov was shopped around to teams before he was waived, which lends to what we discussed on this podcast after Svechnikov got waived and cleared, which is that, putting him on waivers was a little bit of a risk, but there has to be the assumption here that that was a calculated risk based on, what the waiver market was like. And having it be confirmed now by Elliot Friedman was one of the people who confirmed it as well. Yzerman tried to shop Svechnikov around and there was no takers. Sees that everything is tight this year. Guys are flying through waivers and took this opportunity to waive Svechnikov, move him through to have the flexibility to move him up and down from the taxi squad in the NHL. But on the market.
Okay. Let me take my tinfoil hat and I'm going to put it on. Because I still have faith in Yzerman, and I still believe that Yzerman really, truly does know what he's doing, and he is actually the best GM in the NHL. I do not profess to be a scouting expert. I do not profess to know more than Steve Yzerman or his pro scouting team. I watched almost every single Red Wings game this year. Tonight was kind of the nail in the coffin. Not nail in the coffin. It's on in a positive way. Watching Svechnikov, there's no way. There's no way they look at this guy and go, yeah, no, we'd much rather waive him than keep Darren Helm or Sam Gagner. Like, I'm sorry. There's no argument for it. I don't think Svechnikov was actually really and truly shopped. I think Yzerman made those calls just to see if he would clear waivers. He wasn't actively trying. It literally just was him seeing, is anybody actually interested? And then when he had like 20 no's, and then the other 11 teams didn't have, or 10 teams didn't have cap space, he's like, okay, push him through. He can finish the season in Grand Rapids when our season's done. Or for whatever reason it was, because again, they're crazy if they think Svechnikov is a downgrade on 12 forwards on this team right now, most of whom are like 6-7 years older than him.
I don't know that he...
Again, tinfoil hat. I'm not sitting here and this is my definitive...
I agree that part of that exercise was to gauge interest, because obviously the more likely scenario was that he was going to be waived. We discussed it on the last pod, does Darren Helm stay up over Svechnikov on merit? No. Does he stay up because you need him playing games to show him off to teams in case they want to trade for him? Yeah, that's sound logic, because you take that pick, over the loss of not playing Svechnikov for a few games or waiving him or whatever, especially if it's a calculated risk. The NHL is playing tight right now. Almost nobody's being claimed on waivers unless you're the GM of the Leafs. Then everyone who you put on waivers is getting claimed.
Proof that honestly, everyone hates the Leafs.
Honestly, I think there can be a world where Yzerman both thinks Svechnikov is, obviously better than a lot of these, bottom line scrubs in the Red Wings, and also 20, turning 25 years old and saying, look, I like the kid. He's doing well this season, yada, yada, not perfect, but doing good, especially considering the career he's had. He's going to be 25. He's not going to be part of the long-term future. If I can get a second for him or, something good, I'm going to take that chance. If he stays, that's fine, but I have to take the shot because, you talked about Adam Ernie's value being high. Svechnikov was a big name there for a little while.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And as much as I'm like advocating for Svechnikov, if someone offers a second-round pick for him right now, you take it and run. I agree with that, but he went through waivers for nothing. So there is no market for him. None. Zero. So his name shouldn't even be brought up at the trade deadline unless he's a sweetener in another trade.
In general, I don't think there's a market because I think, there's not enough buyers this year, but players don't get claimed on waivers for a myriad of reasons. Some of it being number of contracts on a team and some of it being money in and money out. So if this is money matching, someone might bring in Svechnikov. Absolutely.
Yeah. And there could be a trade to be had here where it's body in, body out. Okay. What team has a struggling prospect that can't get a grab? One guy that actually came to mind for me on this one actually got traded today. So that scrap that because they could look at a Henrik Borgstrom or something like that. Yeah. A prospect who isn't working out in Florida said, screw you. I'm going back to Finland. Trade me. He got traded to Chicago today. But, if they traded Svechnikov for someone like him for a change of scenery, Borgstrom's maybe not as good at this point in his career, but is younger. Sure. I get it. Fine with it. I actually saw another, I forget where it was, and I don't want to spoil it if it's in overtime, but someone tweeted at either us or me a really interesting Cholowski trade proposal that piqued my interest, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. What would the return look like for Svechnikov? I don't know. Where I would be happy, third or better. I'm not exactly keen on trading him, but at the same time, I know that, if and when room is cleared for him in this lineup, it's a bottom 6 role. That's where Svechnikov is likely fitting in medium long term.
Yeah, I would want a second. I think he's worth more than a third round pick despite being 24. Because he is proven to be a usable bottom 6 forward who can contribute a little bit of offense. He didn't have a point tonight, but I would argue he had his best game as an NHL player tonight. He was buzzing before Detroit got caved in the third period. So yeah, he can contribute. And, we talk about bringing back, maybe Luke Glendening comes back in the offseason and maybe they re-sign, this guy, that guy. Well, Svechnikov's younger than all of them. So if you're going to fill the bottom 6 with air quotation guys, competent bums, Svechnikov's the best candidate right now. So yeah, it's, if he gets moved for a decent return or like kind of a change of scenery type trade for another prospect, fine. Yeah, I'm not losing sleep over a third liner, but yeah, it's got to be something.
Sam Gagner is a guy who I think fits into that mold of, teams aren't exactly going to be knocking down the door for him, but there might be 11th hour GM wants someone super cheap, doesn't want to spend more than a 5th or a 6th and says, hey, Detroit, can we have Sam Gagner for the rest of the year? You know what? I want to appreciate what Sam Gagner has done this year. He's not been lights out, but I think he's played, relative to his talent level, I think he's played reasonably well. Also, if you look at it, a lot of the underlying numbers, he's been incredibly consistent and has performed well in his capacity. So wouldn't be a bad get for a team.
Yeah, he's fine. There's that word. He's that guy who the eye test doesn't really match up with the underlying numbers, but at the same time, you really don't see him in a lot of the circus acts that go on the ice from time to time with the Red Wings, which probably lends to the good on ice numbers, even though he is almost never involved in, good offensive zone bursts, we'll call them. But yeah, he's fine. He's guy. He's competent bum. He's valuable to a team who is struggling to find depth. A team like Boston comes to mind for Gagner. Not that they would trade him, but they have no scoring depth on that team. And not that Gagner is setting the world on fire this year, but he's probably an upgrade on at least 2 or 3 guys in Boston's bottom 6. So, I don't think he gets traded, but he's one of the more likely candidates out of, the mountain of guys the Red Wings have up for grabs.
Yeah, he's within range, but I wouldn't give him better than like 25% at best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Return, 5th, 6th.
Yeah, late round pick.
Yeah. Giovanni Smith, I don't really see someone looking out for him. Other forwards, those who are injured right now, Tyler Bertuzzi, I think, is similar conversation to Anthony Mantha. If he was healthy, I think he'd have a ton of interest, especially because he's expiring as an RFA with ARB rights, but there's no information on when he's going to play, and it's likely not looking to be this season, so I think that rules that out. Robbie Fabry probably won't be moved.
No, unlikely.
I can see teams wanting to, but Yzerman got him for a song, and so unless you have amazing value coming back there, assuming he gets healthy, he's been out a couple of games, I think, a few games, you keep him. All right, close to returning to the lineup, presumably, hopefully, because up there with Glendening, this is another guy where I think you put him in if there's a trade, it's likely him category, Bobby Ryan.
Mm-hmm. He had a great start, cooled off a little bit, regressed to the mean, but Bobby Ryan was dancing this year. His hands are still there. He still makes stuff happen in the offensive zone. He can't skate for shit anymore, but that was never really his thing. So he can still make things happen even when he's putting around the ice. Effective on the power play, creative player, lot of offense, makes less than $1 million. So he is exactly what a lot of teams are looking for right now. Again, it might come down to cost because I don't see him getting a second round pick, but I do see a lot of interest for him. But on the flip side, everything he's done for Detroit and everything he said about Detroit leads me to believe he's a guy Detroit might want to extend and keep around. So I think it's more likely than not he gets traded, but I I will not be shocked if Yzerman just says, if I'm not getting a second or a third round pick for him, I'm just going to hang on to him.
Yeah, Max had that article today, I believe, with Bobby Ryan, and it was a good read, and it was, another conversation where Bobby Ryan reaffirmed his appreciation and his kind of want really to stay in Detroit. And I can see that feeling being mutual. Here's the thing. If Yzerman thinks a hotter market next year might garner a bigger return, that's a risk with someone like Bobby Ryan. If you can't skate, you're relying on those skills, and Brad's right, they're still there, but when are those going to fall off? He's 34 years old right now. So I'm pretty much saying anything halfway reasonable, understanding that this year's prices and offers are going to be low. I'm moving him. It is sad. Like, I do like Bobby Ryan, and if he comes back, I'm thrilled. But I think it is a risk to hang on to him. If you can get like a fourth, third, sucks a little bit, because you think in another year he might be a target to get a lot more from an irrational buyer. But yeah, I don't know. I put him on par with Glendening in terms of being traded.
I think he's a little less likely to be traded than Glendening, but I do put him north of 50%.
Evan, what's the lowest value you take for Bobby Ryan?
I think a fourth I'd be okay with. I just don't see where the market is this year to be getting second round picks for Bobby Ryan.
Yeah,
if it was a normal year, I'd say, I'd be thrilled with a second round pick, but I just don't, and I'd be okay with a third, but I just don't see it this year. I really think it's a kind of a win-win. You trade Bobby Ryan, you get a pick out of it. Okay, great. If he stays, well, he likes it in Detroit and he's got a good attitude. Great. And you'll probably get him really cheap. So at the end of the day, I think whatever outcome there is, I think it'll be a good one.
All right, let's move on to the defenseman, and we'll start with the big name. Carrying a $5.7 million cap hit, which will almost definitely need to be retained to the max, so half of that, Mark Stahl.
So Mark Stahl has surprised, and he has played way better than any of us would have expected, than anyone would have expected, period. The cheapest we can move him for is a $2.7 million cap hit, prorated, of course, which is still a lot. 2.85, sorry. But then obviously it's prorated. That's still going to be a tough move for what Mark Stahl is. So he's better. He's improved. For all we shit on him at the beginning of the year, a lot of those oopsies went away. And I think if he had Bobby Ryan's contract, he'd be a really good bet to be moved. He still could be, if it's the right team, the right situation, and there's a contract coming back. It absolutely could happen. And I could see the appeal. Like a team like Florida comes to mind for Mark Stahl. Losing Ekblad, they're going to need some depth. Makes sense.
It'll be a seamless transition,
Yeah.
Potential Norris candidate finalist to another one.
Yeah.
It'll be easy. It's
Exactly.
a no-brainer.
But the cap hit's going to be a big sticking point, so Yzerman will have to get creative to move that one.
That's one where you're going to have to get a little bit fancy. Anything that comes back from Mark Stahl right now is a bonus. Detroit's already acquired a second just for taking the contract. So even if it's the equivalent of a 7th round pick coming back, I'm like, great. Instead of a 2nd round pick for paying Mark Stahl for 3/4 of a year, it's a 2nd and a 7th, whatever. But yeah, if a team really wants Mark Stahl for one reason or another, and they just can't make the numbers work, and Detroit has to take a contract back, and Detroit's like, okay, well, you're giving us a bad contract, we're going to need a little more from you, and all of a sudden that pick improves. Yeah, I think that's a situation where, Detroit and Yzerman could be primed to get a little creative with it and maximize the return. Mark Stahl is the hallmark of anything you get is kind of hilarious and a bonus. So by all means, please do it. People are talking about 3rd, 4th round pick for Mark Stahl, and I'm just like, that would be insane. 3rd or 4th round pick is, yeah.
The fact he was mentioned at all on trade boards and as a trade candidate shocked the ever living hell out of me. So the fact that they get anything would be crazy to me.
If they get a 3rd or a 4th round pick for Mark Stahl, it's because we are also taking on a boat anchor of a contract in return.
Yeah.
or we live in a simulation and Yzerman's no longer being coy about the fact that he's the one that's controlling it. Despite his really poor play of late, I think at times something's still off about Troy Stecher. He would need to be the one to be thanked for basically carrying Mark Stahl for the first half of the season.
Yes, absolutely.
And on that note, Troy Stecher.
I would think any other year he would be a big trade candidate right now because he's cheap, he's good, and he has a year and a half left. This year, because he has a year and a half left, I don't think he's even really going to get looked at.
I believe Troy Stecher's received interest. I'm sure someone has kicked the tires just to see what Yzerman would sell him for. I think, let's say prior to Stecher being injured, because it still looks a little funny. And we're at the point of the season where we're trying to evaluate any Red Wings players tough because the team's, so down in the dumps at times. He's done well, and that's attractive to a team. I think a team might even be willing to, an extra year at 1.7. And if Detroit, retains, if they need that for 1 or 2 years, that's not a lot. I think teams can very much stomach that, but Yzerman also sees the value in a player like Stecher, right-handed defenseman, comes in super cheap, is a great filler in the middle of a rebuild, an effective guy, presuming that whatever this funk he's going through is just injury related. He's not, I don't see Yzerman selling him for low. I don't see him selling him for a fifth, or if a team wants to low ball, he'd rather hang on to him. That's a guy where, yeah, you're right, Brad. Normal year, you might be able to get a lot for him, but this year there wouldn't really be a point unless a team was willing to pay actual market value.
And they're comfortable losing him in the expansion draft because the only teams that are buyers this year are contenders, not fringe playoff teams. And how many contenders have less than 3 defensemen they're going to need to protect in the expansion draft this summer? Almost none of them, probably actually none of them. So even though he's got that year left, he's probably viewed as a rental, even if he does get traded. But if it were any other year, no pandemic, no expansion, Troy Stecher would be a stealth first round pick candidate in terms of a return. Second would be the bare minimum. But, alas, the world we live in will prevent that from happening.
I'm going to group these next guys together. Nemeth, Merrill, Juice, Biega. These are guys where I'm not saying it's insane if a team trades for them, but they've not exactly been whispered across GM's lips all year. They might pick him up as a depth guy. It wouldn't be for much if they did, and be a mild surprise.
Yeah. Nothing, not a whole lot to get excited about there.
Yeah, as evidenced by the fact that you literally yawned when I read out their names.
Yeah, I just hear the name Nemeth and it's just, I turn into Evan.
DeKaiser, there's absolutely no way. There's absolutely no way DeKaiser gets moved.
He might be the least likely Red Wing to get traded.
Philip Hronek, he's an RFA after this season. Having a good season by counting stats, by his standards and on-ice play, maybe leaves some to be desired. I don't see a situation where Hronek is moved this year.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. 2 goalies. Greiss,
hold on,
not being moved. Yeah, go ahead.
One defenseman we forgot about, and I want to talk about it because I saw a proposal.
That's fair.
And it made too much sense to me. So Dennis Cholowski, who everybody knows I'm an apologist for, and I think he's way better than what he's been given, and I think a lot of his slow development is due to how poorly the team has developed him. That being said, he is the quintessential change of scenery trade type. But when you do a change of scenery trade for a similar player of a similar age, you generally do it if it's a player who's also really struggling on a bad team, but it's at a different position. So, what do the Red Wings? The Red Wings have an abundance of left shot D. You know what they don't have an abundance of? Centers. Do you know who's been really struggling despite being a first round pick on a really shitty team? Casey Middlestat. There's a chance. There could be something there. Buffalo needs D, Red Wings need centers. Both guys, by and large, have disappointed.
Detroit would have to add.
I think Detroit would have to add. I don't think it would have to be anything super substantial, but I think there's something that could work there. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm not even saying it's been rumored. And I feel so guilty for not crediting whoever posted it because I literally saw it in passing while I was at work this afternoon. But then it kind of stuck in my mind and I thought about it. And I'm like, you know what? That was That's a good idea. So, and I'm not even that big of a Middlestat fan, but it makes sense.
The residual value on Middlestat, whatever you believe in him as a player, the residual value on him is substantially higher than it is on Cholowski. So I don't see Adams making that trade for Buffalo unless Detroit adds. And I don't think it would make sense for Yzerman to add what I think it would take. Like Buffalo would ask for like a second in addition to Cholowski there, I think.
What if it was, pull a prospect out of my hat here, McIsaac?
I don't know. I don't know. Does Adams do that? Trade a high profile prospect? Do you want to, like, how old is Middlestat now?
Looking it up now. He's going to be 23 this year.
Is he already 23? Wow.
He's 22, but he's going to be 23 this year.
No, I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. And I get why it's an attractive idea. I'm also not a big believer in Middlestat, but then again, I don't really think I'm a huge Dennis Cholowski fan. I think out of the three of us, you're the only one who really beats that drum. I'd be shocked if I haven't even had an opinion on Dennis Cholowski.
I have no opinion one way or another.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's just too much residual name value here for this I get it. Like, I get the excitement, but I don't think it would shake out really.
Hey, at least Middlestat looks pretty decent compared to the player picked directly after him. Anyways.
Who is that, Brad?
Anyways.
The two goaltenders, Thomas Greiss, aside from his recent spell of strong play, has looked absolutely terrible. $3.6 million for next season as well. He is not going to be traded for. Jonathan Bernier was injured, came back tonight, got lit up for 7 goals, which is unfortunate. But altogether, coming into this game, had a .918 save percentage on a god-awful Red Wings team. Has been the saving grace for these Red Wings so many times over the past few seasons. Goalie markets are strange. This year's market is strange. I don't know if those two cancel out or add on to each other. I really have no prediction on whether or not he'll be moved, but for any team looking for goalie depth, I genuinely, truly believe, all bias aside, that Jonathan Bernier is a prime target for them.
Jonathan Bernier is easily the best goalie rental on the market. Assuming Florida keeps Drieger, but I think there's even an argument to be made there because Bernier's, been there, done that for longer. Ironically, the two teams to me that make the most sense for Bernier are two teams he's already played for. Colorado makes the most sense to me because they are arguably the best team in the NHL and they don't have a backup goalie right now. And until Toronto knows what the hell is going on with Frederik Andersen, Michael Hutchinson can't be their backup going into the playoffs because Jack Campbell's riding an absolute heater now, which is great for them. But he's still playing banged up. He's not practicing after game days. And Michael Hutchinson is their current backup, and he's terrible. So, and the Leafs have given 0 updates on Freddie Andersen, which is very unlike Dubas. So that could be worse than imagined. So I think if Bernier's moved, like Colorado is far and away the most likely team. I think there's at best 2 or 3 other teams who would even consider adding a goalie right now. But any team that is looking to add a goalie, Bernier's the best bet.
I give it like a 1 in 3 chance of it happening, and it's because of how weird goalie markets are. Like you said, the buyers in general this year it's a short list, and buyers for goalies, that's an even shorter list. So, I love Jonathan Bernier, and if Detroit retains him, like if they extend him, I'm thrilled. At the same time, next year would be a great year to suck a lot with Shane Wright at the top of that draft.
Yeah. Again, Bernier is another one of those guys, if they keep and re-sign, great. I give Bernier a 50-50 chance to be traded, but understanding that of the 50% of me that thinks he'll be traded, 45 of that is Colorado. So if Colorado decides to race to the bottom in terms of trade value and goes for a Drieger or a Ryan Miller, okay, then I don't think Bernier gets moved, but until Colorado makes a move, I still think it's pretty high.
I have no idea where I sit on this. Like, I would like Bernier to be traded because I think there's an actual market for a backup goalie. I just don't know this year. Like you said, Ryan, like the goalie market doesn't really make any sense at all in a normal year. So who knows what it's going to be like this year? I don't know. I feel like he should get moved, but will he get moved? I'm not very confident.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because, again, that's another player where you look at someone like Bobby Ryan or, Luke Glendening, where in a hot market where GMs are like, they have a ton of FOMO and they don't want to miss out on their guy. And this is a guy they fall in love with maybe more than they should, and they overspend. We've seen that happen in previous years. I've seen Paul Gaustad's name invoked more in the past 3 weeks than I have when Paul Gaustad played hockey. So I think Bernie fits that mold, and it's unfortunate, but I push him more towards if you can get a good enough asset. Like, honestly, I don't know where to set the price here. Third? Do you go as low as fourth for Bernier? It might be worth it. And if you love him that much, try to bring him back in the offseason. And if you can't, it sucks, but at the same time, you need to maximize assets here. It's going to be tough to sell anyone.
Sort of where you have a conversation with the player and say, this is the offer we have for you. This is the team. Do you like their odds to win the cup? Would you come back in the offseason? And you kind of feel it out that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you let it run. Like, Bernie's had to play goaltending, or had to goaltend for Detroit. Like, he should have that option.
Yeah, he's for sure won the opportunity. He's got to be a shell of a goalie after being just destroyed night after night by high danger chances. Yeah, he's absolutely earned the right to have a little bit of agency over where he goes.
I would still love to see Yzerman play hardball with them. Here, this is your extension. Please sign it or I'm training you to Buffalo in 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, fine. If it comes in cheap, sure. That's great. Last asset that I think I'm most excited for the Red Wings to use or to move here, and that's their cap space.
The old intermediary.
I don't know what it looks like. Is it a Hall move? Is it, Jaden Schwartz? Like, are you facilitating a trade between teams that hate each other and wouldn't usually deal together? So you do a kind of sneaky thing where you pull the wool over one team's eyes, like say Pittsburgh and Philly. There's so many opportunities here, and there's so many other variables that you don't want to be, involved in it. How many real dollars does the owner want to spend, that kind of thing? Because that matters right now in the COVID flat cap world too. It's Yzerman's biggest opportunity to flex his muscles, make a big splash, make something out of nothing. It's not easy to do. You need willing participants, and that there seems to be a shortage of that this year. So, I wouldn't bank on it, but if a trade gets made with cap space, I'd wager that it'd be the most exciting trade for the Red Wings in the coming days.
The Red Wings could make Taylor Hall a $2 million cap hit. How would that not appeal to a contender, to a Boston, to an Edmonton, to a whoever? Because Buffalo retains half, Detroit's the intermediary. They retain half of what's left. Taylor Hall's going to the next team for $2 million.
Can you double retain?
Pretty sure you can, yeah. I could be wrong. I'm not 1,000% sure on that, but
no. But in general, like you can make Taylor Hall a very cheap player. You can make players where you're just like, oh, I would love to have him for 25 games in a playoff run or whatever it is, but I just don't have the room on my cap. You can make all of that work. There's not a lot of movement this year. There just isn't a lot of movement this year. Who knows? Deadline's April 12th, Monday, April 12th at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's not going to be, we're not going to know until we get there, but if you want to see fireworks, the cap space is where you do it. Any other Red Wings players that we've missed or ones you want to go back to and discuss regarding their likelihood to be traded, what you think the return would be, that kind of thing?
Nope.
Okay. All right. I want you guys to predict overall, including goalies, how many trades are the Red Wings involved with by the time the clock strikes 3:01 on Monday?
3.
3 trades. Okay.
3.
I was going to say 2.
I've got my 2 likely ones and then the field for 1 more.
I don't want to be a doomer and say 1, so I'll bump up and share Evans here. I think
I feel like I'm being so bearish on the current state of affairs in the NHL trade market, but
yeah,
we've just watched so many players go through waivers for free that I just don't have any confidence in it.
Never have I wanted to be wrong more than this episode. I hope we're so wrong about this episode.
I think Glendening and Ryan are both more likely than not. So then basically my argument for 3 is any one of the other 9 players we talked about as being somewhat reasonable to get traded. One of them gets traded.
I'm going to guess 2. I think it's going to be the obvious Glendening and Ryan, and I think we're not going to see anything fancier. But I will add in, I think we'll see 2 more by draft day.
The Red Wings have too many UFAs. Whoever they go into the offseason with still under contract, they're keeping. They almost have to.
I'll stick by it. All right. More trade deadline conversation to come. But first, I want to talk to you about the FanDuel Sportsbook, who are the sponsors of this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast. We are thrilled to partner with them as they bring us fans what we really need this season, more excitement. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook for so many reasons. It's easy to use from registration to deposits and finding great bets. Withdrawals are quick and easy. You get your money in as quick as 24 hours. Now listen to this. FanDuel is letting you place your first bet risk-free up to $1,000. Just place a bet on any game and FanDuel will refund you up to $1,000 back if you don't win your first bet. No strings attached. If you win, you keep the cash. If you lose, you'll get up to $1,000 back in site credit. We wish we could bet on games like Saturday's matchup against Carolina where the Svechnikovs face off again. Why? So you can take the easy money with Carolina. Or if you're crazy, you take the underdog money with the Red Wings. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app to get started with that risk-free bet of up to $1,000 that we're excited is being offered to you. Be sure to sign up with promo code WWP so they know the Winged Wheel podcast sent you. That's FanDuel Sportsbook, promo code WWP. You must be 21 and older and present in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, West Virginia, Indiana, Colorado, Iowa, Tennessee, Virginia, or Michigan. First online real money wager only. Site credit is non-withdrawable and expires in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See sportsbook.fanduel.com for details. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-9-WITHIN in Indiana, 1-800-GAMBLER in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, or Virginia. Tennessee Redline 1-800-889-9789. www.1800gambler.net in West Virginia, or call 1-800-270-7117 in Michigan. All right. This trade deadline is the Taylor Hall trade deadline. I think that's what it boils down to. There's a couple other big names here. Palmieri's already moved. Actually, do you want to talk about that trade first? Let's talk about that trade first.
We talked about it yesterday, but only the patrons got to hear.
Yeah, it was. We did a Patreon exclusive where we considered some hypothetical trades from listeners. We went through a bunch of them. So if you haven't listened to that, go through and listen to it.
And the Palmieri trade happened live while we were recording it.
Yeah, it was fun. I was an asshole and I brought it up to these guys as if it was a proposed trade, but it's actually what happened. So the Islanders got at 50% retained for both Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac in exchange for a 2021 first, a 2022 conditional fourth that can bump up to a third. There's a bunch of different caveats there, and 2 prospects, AJ Greer and Mason Jobst. But essentially it's that first that's moving back. So that's the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello's swing to replace Anders Lee.
Well, Zajac and Palmieri combined add up to about a point per game. So that's not nothing. Of course, the NHL being the league that is just endless amounts of nepotism, Lamoriello trades with the Devils. They're fine players. They're good. It makes a ton of sense for the Islanders. They lost their captain. They're in their cup window. And Lamoriello, I respect the balls on the guy because every time he's got a team he thinks is good, he does not hold back. I think the Devils did great because getting a first round pick, period, in this market this year is a miracle. So, both teams got what they needed, and it's that rare trade where I look at it from both sides going, yeah, I'd be happy.
this is a year where this was a big litmus test to say, oh yeah, there's not going to be a lot of high prices paid this year. And if you might be thinking, New Jersey got a first, Ryan, for Palmieri and Zajac, like, you consider those guys, that's actually not a bad haul. Okay, sure. But a guy like Palmieri, like if you move Palmieri and Zajac together at half of their AAV and most other trade deadlines, you're talking about more than a first coming back there. You're talking about at least another premium asset coming back there. I don't know. It's not a bad, I think New Jersey did well, all things considered, but it's a pretty big indicator that this is going to be a muted year.
It's good depth once again for the COVID Cup.
Yeah.
I don't think a first is really that bad to give up for two solid depth pieces. I think it's decent.
No, I don't think it's a bad price to pay for the Islanders. Yeah, I think they took their swing.
Yeah, New Jersey will be happy to get a first.
I don't know. I think it's a tidy piece of business for both teams. Fine enough.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a high first round pick either. So New Jersey didn't it's not a king's ransom, but if it's going to be hard to sell this year, then sure.
Is it this year's first round pick?
Yeah. So, whatever. And that's going to be a late pick unless something goes catastrophically wrong for the Islanders.
Yeah.
Okay. Florida Bill Zito in Florida did a tidy little bit of business to clear up some cap space, moved Brett Connolly, in addition to Henrik Borgstrom and Riley Stillman, who Giovanni Smith recently beat the ever-loving piss out of, and a 7th round pick to Chicago in exchange for Lucas Wallmark and Lucas Carlson. So essentially it was moving Connolly's contract, and then they added in Borgstrom and Stillman as sweeteners. They cleared up nearly $2.5 million in cap space. So
that's Mark Stahl money.
Absolutely it is. Something like that.
That's my takeaway from that trade is Mark Stahl money.
Florida has an insane amount of cap space now.
Just are they willing to spend it? They might not be a spend to the cap team. I mean,
I don't know, man.
They should be. And I don't know enough. Who's it? Vinny Viola? I don't know enough about him to know if he is going to go all in. I don't know what his business is that got him all his money. So I don't know if he's getting kicked in the pills in the pandemic like everybody else or not. But Florida is intriguing, but they've historically not been a team to spend. So, and they have a new GM too. So they could do everything and nothing, and neither would surprise me.
Their cap space is somewhere between $16.5 and $18 million, somewhere around there. And I saw actually, friend of the podcast, Reese Jessup, note that Taylor Hall and Jack Eichel add up to roughly around that. And that's without salary retained.
To be fair, they don't make this move if they're not planning on adding.
Right? So, and that's a good team, and they might be thinking this is the first time this team is playing well enough to justify adding. I don't care who the owner is. If I'm the GM, I'm knocking on his door every day to say, hey, we need to add.
I think I saw something today about someone mentioned Hall to Florida, and the response was, oh, no, Florida needs a defenseman. They don't need Taylor Hall. No, but they probably want a Taylor Hall. It's not a bad thing to have too much offense. So when you have a ton of cap space and a ton of assets, you can get a Taylor Hall. You can treat yourself.
Yeah. Let's talk about Taylor Hall. I understand it's not been the performance we've seen from his Hart season. He's shooting at a miserable rate. And even if you look at his footage, he's not been a good shooter this year, but still a fantastic left winger. They're easily the best player still on the market right now. This is a sparse trade market. We're on Craig Cousins' trade board. Taylor Hall is first, and you go down to fourth, and it's Luke Glendening.
Oh, no.
Who's in on Taylor Hall? Does he get moved? He has to get moved. If I'm Kevin Adams, I don't care if you're trading Taylor Hall for a third. You move Taylor Hall because he's not coming back to Buffalo, right?
Unlikely. Very unlikely. The problem is, unless Buffalo finds an intermediary, he's a $4 million player, even if they retain half. And that knocks off a lot of suitors. Unfortunately, again, it can all be done because you can take contracts back. But NHL GMs are not a creative lot. So that decreases the likelihood. Because of the dollars and the cap hit too, there are a lot of national writers who don't even think Taylor Hall gets a first round pick.
No, yeah, I think that value wouldn't be from an outright first. I think they'd have to look for other things to add in there.
And I understand his shooting percentage is low, but historically we've seen a lot of GMs who don't understand how that impacts a player's value. I see Jordan Eberle, but ironically we're talking about Eberle and Hall in the same sentence again. Anyways, he's still worth a first round pick. It's like Zadina in Detroit. We've seen the chances he's had. Any other year, he's got 10 goals. Same thing for Taylor Hall in Buffalo. That's not a sustainable shooting percentage. He's not a sniper and his shot isn't his strength, but it's at least as good as Larkin's, and Larkin can carry a higher shooting percentage. So can Taylor Hall. And over the course of his career, Taylor Hall has carried a higher shooting percentage. So when that regresses to the mean, he's going to seem like a bargain.
Who even is in on him at this point? Looking at the standings.
So 2 teams jump out to me immediately, with a third one being a fun storyline if it happens. I look immediately at Boston and Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I think Edmonton could and would be fun.
That'd be hysterical. I would love that so much.
Yep. And it makes sense. They need depth scoring. Taylor Hall makes a ton of sense there. And now that Peter Chiarelli's not there anymore, that could be even more fun. I would have thought the Islanders actually would have been my front runner for Hall before the Palmieri Zajac trade went through.
Yeah.
Just looking through it, there's other teams that could make it work, but they just don't immediately jump off the page at you. Vegas has 0 cap space. Colorado could. And Colorado has the assets to do it. Colorado should be in on everybody with how much cap space they have and how good they are.
Oh my God. That is that is exactly why you're patient with your cap space, Joe Sakic. This is masterclass, the team he's built in Colorado.
Yeah. And again, it's all about moving contracts in or out. So any team can be in if they can move a contract out, but that's easier said than done. Like, I wouldn't rule out Toronto for Taylor Hall, but again, that's going to be what contract do they move to get Taylor Hall? It's hard. So yeah, I think to me, Boston, Florida, Colorado are my 3 favorites, but you could throw in 4 or 5 other teams there that would at least kick the tires on it.
Looking at another player on Buffalo, not exactly a really notable player, but Linus Ullmark is one of several spoiler goalies if you're keen on the Jonathan Bernier market. Linus Ullmark, David Rittich with the Flames, Merzlikins has been dangled by the Blue Jackets. There's a bunch of other, depth goalies or good depth goalies or supporting goalies that teams can pick from here. So, Ullmark will come cheap too. If Yzerman's setting a high price for Bernier, I think Ullmark will come.
Ullmark will not be cheap. Buffalo doesn't have a goalie for next season right now, so they're in the same situation as Detroit. Ullmark, okay, I think the stats have changed now, but at one point last week, he was like 8-5-1 on the season with that Buffalo team, and all other goalies were like 1-18-3.
I would bet anything they trade him for not as cheap as possible, but if Team X, if Colorado comes to Buffalo and says we can get Bernier, they lie and say we can get Bernier for a third, but we'd prefer Ullmark. I'd say Buffalo does that.
I don't think they would do it. They need a good return on him because he's a lot younger than Bernier too.
He's 27. Yeah. He's 5 years younger. Yeah. You know what? I hadn't considered his age. Okay. So maybe he won't come so cheap. But still, teams are going to gun for Ullmark.
I don't think that his age has anything to do with the price on trade value for him. I think Buffalo's going to go full court to keep him, to re-sign him, to extend him. If he says, piss off, I'm not ever playing in Buffalo beyond this year, okay, yeah, he's going to get a pretty good return at the deadline.
That would be smart.
Speaking of spoiler players, before you get to the Mark Stahls being bought, someone's going to have to go in on David Savard. Someone might take a crack at a Ryan Murray out of New Jersey. Brandon Montour has been talked about with the Sabres. That's a fire sale there. There's a bunch of players there who'd probably come in rating higher than Mark Stahl. Everything is kind of on the table here. Mattias Ekholm. That's the last really big one that I want to talk about. Nashville and Mattias Ekholm. Nashville's moved up to a playoff spot right now. They are, their points percentage. Yeah, they actually have straight up the fourth best points percentage. Chicago's fallen off. Dallas has been, Dallas all year. Columbus and Detroit absolutely suck. Right now, Nashville might sneak into a playoff spot in a central division that is weak after the third team. So does that stop their plans of moving Ekholm? Does that stop their plans of maybe moving Ellis? Does that stop David Poile from blowing it up?
Short answer, yes. Because there's a couple, the logical part of you says, hey, don't do what Columbus did a couple years ago where they held on to Duchesne, Panarin, and all that, and then for a second round exit. Obviously, Columbus was a different scenario because they had never been to the second round before, but still. But this is, again, a weird year. Ekholm's value isn't as high as it otherwise would be. You can still sell on him next year. He would still be a valuable rental. So you can keep him and still get assets for him. It just might not be this year. A point I heard brought up on another podcast. Hey, teams are worried about season ticket sales next year. You know what helps season ticket sales next year? Make the playoffs. And even if you look at it, Florida, Carolina are challenging Tampa for first in the Central. So if Nashville's playing anybody but Tampa, they could sit there and go, yeah, Carolina doesn't have great goaltending and Florida just lost their best defenseman. We could surprise someone. I wouldn't bet on it, but David Poile will be thinking it. So I think Nashville went from a seller to a stand pat team. I don't think they're going to be buyers by any means, but I think they like where they're at. I think they like where they're going, and they're not going to change anything.
It doesn't really move the needle a lot, but if you're a team like Detroit who has a lot of assets, but none of them are really super high end, you're happy to have a team like Nashville out of the way. You want to remove as many players from the pool to buy from as possible. Okay. Some hypothetical trades coming from Twitter here. Rowan said Brad and his flash hockey bat, which is your hockey stick, for Adam Lascaris. I'm happy to make that trade. Bernier and Glendening to the Panthers for Drieger and a third with the intent to extend Drieger.
I would love that if you could do that. I don't think Florida says yes to that.
Yeah, I don't think Florida says yes to that. Bobby Ryan to the Leafs for a second or a third.
I think a third is realistic, and Bobby Ryan is the exact type of player I could see Toronto looking at right now.
Bernier and Nemeth to Colorado for a second-round pick and Connor Timmins.
End that statement at second-round pick, and I think you actually have something there.
That's from Dennis Cholosky fan. Nature Bats Last says Mantha to Montreal for a 2023 first and a 2022 second. I don't think that's insane.
I'm going to say yes, and it's for one reason and one reason only. I think Montreal's a stealth candidate to get real shitty in the next couple of years. So having a first-round pick in the Bedard-Michkov draft, you never know. Unlikely.
Roll the dice.
But getting an extra ball in that hopper would be a big deal.
It'd be super hard to move an asset like Mantha without seeing the return come back to you in 2 years minimum, because then that player has to be developed. But yeah, it's pretty clever, that one. And I don't even know about the value going back there from Bergevin. I could see Bergevin saying, I don't give a shit about 2023. I need to be here in 2023. So yeah, let's do it. That could be interesting. There's another one here from Brandon Joyner about Bernier and maybe a third to Colorado for Newhook. I think the price for Newhook's way higher. Trading Chris Draper for $1. Oh, here's one from Scott Fultz. Brad, Crisco, and a first for a seventh. Have to give up a lot to shed ourselves with Crisco's contract. Yeah, Evan, I think it's time that we bite the bullet and just call a spade a spade. Crisco's a failed experiment.
Whatever the league minimum for podcasts is, I'm pretty sure that's what I'm making. So what the hell do you mean moving that contract?
App State Nick says Anthony Mantha to the Penguins for Poulin and their 2022 first.
Who was it for Poulin in the 2021st? Mantha?
Mantha, yeah.
I'm not a big Poulin guy.
Would you take the 2022 first, though?
I would, but not for Mantha straight up.
All right. I'm sure there's going to be more of these in overtime. We're going to jump into overtime, brought to you on this late midweek episode by our Patreon supporters. Thank you all so much for making this show go round. We're going to start with Alex Zucco, who says, thank you guys for doing this special episode last night. Follow-up question for today's focus on which of our prospects are most likely to be on the NHL roster to start next year. On a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being most likely, please rank. Moritz Seider,
9.5.
Yeah.
Lucas Raymond,
2.
I'll give it a 4.
Yeah, I was thinking about a 4 too.
Joe Veleno,
5.
I'll give it 5.5.
Well, I'll say a 5. I think it's a coin flip.
Gustav Lindstrom,
2.
What number is that?
My official response is, who cares?
Jonathan Berggren. Yeah, I'll call that one a 3. I think it's
2.5
time for him.
I'll be optimistic.
Former defenseman Ryan Hanna says, hey all, I just want to say it's awesome that you promote the Jamie Daniels Foundation. I'm applying for my certification in substance abuse treatment this week. Wish me luck. Very, a big good luck wish to you. I wish I could know your actual name, not former defenseman Ryan Hanna. Proposal, Jeff Blashill for a bag of pucks. We could save the team money on travel by launching him there on a trebuchet. I don't know. I think Jeff Blashill might be a free agent this offseason, so I don't know if teams are going to move assets for him. I wish coaches trades could come back. I don't think anything deeper than that should happen, but I kind of wish coaching trades would come back. Yako Ruta says Darren Helm with full salary retention to the Capitals for a conditional 5th turns into a 4th if the Caps make it to the 3rd round of the playoffs and Helm plays in 50% of the games. Absolutely.
I would do it in a heartbeat. 0 chance Washington does.
Brad's anger manifested says, would really love to see the Red Wings make some moves so there's spots for our young guys to play. Question to you is, what is your favorite / most obscure non-Red Wings hockey jersey that you own? Mine is the Kenya ice hockey jersey I bought for their fundraiser a few years back. That one's sweet. I've seen it.
I have one of the Anaheim Ducks alternates from the 90s, the white ones where like the green is up on the shoulders and comes down the sleeve a little bit. If you remember those ones, they didn't wear them for long, but they were dope as hell. I don't have a name or number on it, but I still love the jersey.
I have a Team Canada, the slanted letters along the hockey stick. I really love that one. It was used in it was used for a World Juniors. That's the one it's based off of, but it was also an international team as well. Evan, do you own a single jersey that's not Red Wings?
I have a Team Canada jersey.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
actually more than I thought. Slava Kozlov's doppelganger says Bernier in a second to the Wild for Rossi.
Minnesota hangs up the phone.
On a serious note, how corrupt are the junior leagues in Canada? Is it pay to play or get paid to play? Do the CHL leagues pay top prospects not to go to the NCAA or USNTDP? Thanks for making my day easier with the podcast. # Brad Brigade.
For minor hockey, there are way too many teams that are pay to play. And for the CHL, there are absolutely some palms being greased in some of these deals.
London Knights.
Yep.
London Knights. Brett S. says, hey guys, curious for your take on development. Had we won the lottery the past few years, what do you think we should have done with Hughes and Lafreniere? Would the NHL be the best for their development on a team as bad as the Wings? OHL/USHL seems like it would have been a bad choice too. What would your development arc / timetable for a top 5 pick be that isn't a generational talent? Okay. Everyone's going to suck on the Red Wings. That's the gist of it.
So a top 5 pick that isn't a generational talent. Hey, we have one of those. His name's Lucas Raymond, and I don't expect him to be on the Red Wings next year. I mean, his injury I didn't think it was a high chance, but his recent injury knocked it down even further. I think 2 years is fair for Raymond. I think he'll either go back to the SHL or Grand Rapids next year, and then we'll see him in Detroit after that. for Lafreniere, he was only eligible to go back to the CHL, and there was zero chance I would do that. So he would have been in Detroit. Hughes, I could have seen doing 1 year in college. I wouldn't have hated that. But whatever for where he was at and how dominant he was at the USNTDP, I think it was a fine call to play him in the NHL, and he's been great this year, so it worked.
Third man in says, if you haven't already, we talked about Ernie and Hronik. Christoph Schellender says, hey guys, for which drafted prospect would you trade our first round pick this year? And what are some realistic scenarios? Well, we talked about that a little bit in last episode. Pretty much anyone within the top 10 or 12, going down to
wasn't it Seth Jarvis where we kind of broke apart?
We were talking from the other team's perspective, though. Like, would Carolina say yes to this? Would Florida say yes to this? Would New Jersey say yes to this?
Yeah. Who's that? Why can Lundell? I think all the way down to Lundell for sure. But I just don't know if you get that yes from those teams. Dave W says, 4-year listener, first time patron here. First, just want to say you guys do a great job, and I'm looking forward to hearing you do another roundtable with the Wingdings for brunch, guys. Hey, draft season's coming up. Question is, what's the likelihood that Stevie's trying to exploit the incoming expansion draft, meaning the teams that are going to lose good players to Seattle, and that's why he hasn't made any moves yet? I can see that being a factor, but I think just money and cap space being so tight is definitely the bottleneck here. That's what's limiting things. Adam Ernie Stan Club says, more like Karen Helm, am I right? Anyways, with the full season next year and hopefully an influx of talent on the way, is a 30 to 40 goal season a reasonable expectation for elite goal scorer Adam Ernie? I don't know if you want to 30 to 40 goals. Is probably enough for Adam Ernie in his first 41 games of the season, but I can see him cracking another 50 in the second half. As for a trade, Glendening and Bernier to the Oilers for Koskinen, Tyler Benson, and a mid-round pick, or Cooper Marody.
I think Marody's a little older, so I'd prefer Benson, but that's not terrible, actually. That's a pretty reasonable ask, because Koskinen's contract would be viewed as a negative coming back the other way, hence the better return.
And I'm Devin says, would you rather A, play a 3-on-3 pickup with any 5 former Red Wings, or B, play a 3-on-3 pickup game with any 5 former NHL players without any Red Wings? Oh, I'd go with the Wings here. I go Lidstrom, Stevie, Shanahan. Easy.
I gotta go NHL.
Bum.
I have to play with Wayne. You gotta play with Wayne.
Yeah, that's fair. I get that.
How could you not play with Wayne? Like, I would love to play with Stevie, Nick, but Wayne Gretzky.
Do you play this scrimmage at Little Caesars or in a naturally frozen lake? Oh, you go for the lake for sure. 100% the lake.
Little Caesars. I don't want to have to tap out after 3 hours because my toes are falling off.
Haroon Khan says, hey guys, if Mantha bounces back next year under a new coach and shows his previous form, would you want him to be kept? I personally don't want to see him go at all. Just keep him and keep adding talent. I think I'm still always open to the very high price offer, and it's not a Mantha thing, it's a timeline thing. If someone wants to overpay or pay a premium, I'm taking that deal.
Hold out to trade him till 2022, so the first round pick we get is 2023. There, or even hold out till next year, so the first round pick we get is 2022. We need as many first round picks in those 2 years as possible, is what I'm saying.
Mike Seward says, new patron, been listening for about 2 years. 2 years now. Snapped my arm at work, and you guys helped me out a lot. Well, I hope you're doing better, Mike. But glad we could help out. Who's your guys' top 5 Red Wings players of all time? All right, in no particular order. Gordy, Stevie, Lidstrom are the 3 obvious ones.
Yeah, nobody's arguing any of those.
Sergei Fedorov's in there.
I would say Fedorov and Lindsay for me. Honorable mentions to Sawchuk, Delvecchio, Mickey.
Yeah, there's a ton of players that can go in there. If we're adding in some of our favorites, I'm putting Shanahan in.
Steve Ott. That's it. That's the end of my list.
Yeah. Steve Schmerda says, hey guys, been listening since the Zadina draft and finally able to become a patron. No question, but just thanks for making me a more knowledgeable hockey fan and making the 4-hour drive to visit my girlfriend every other week a little bit more bearable. Would usually stack a few episodes and listen to the pod the whole drive. Steve, happy we can keep you company and thank you so much for the support.
Imagine listening to us for 4 hours. Fuck.
Don Mitchell says, hey guys, thank you for the send us your trade proposal so we can ridicule and bully you episode. It's okay. You do the same thing when Brad puts out his shitty trade proposals, so fair game.
My whole Twitter feed is just me posting my thoughts and then forcing myself to not read the replies because I need to maintain some level of self-confidence.
Question, whose autograph have you seen that's made you shake your head because it's so ugly or bad? If you haven't seen, I encourage you to search Ernie's and Villy Lano's. Woof.
Oh, Villy Lano was the first one that came to mind for me. It was just atrocious.
Is his the one I'm thinking of? Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. That one's awful. Yeah. I can only imagine the phone call that Lou made to get Zajac and Palmieri. Probably went like, listen, baby, I'm sorry. Just want to tell you, don't worry. I'll be late. Don't stay up and wait for me. It's a whole, I think I'm missing. Oh, yeah, it's cut off here. But I don't think Lou says baby. I think Lou just speaks in gruff grunts and then hangs up. Lars, the prophet of the towering behemoth, says, good evening. Congratulations, Ryan, on your excellent pronunciation on Skjald Tamaj fan. Brilliant for a first go. We might just make an honorary suite of you yet. At least one of you will be able to get through the names of the Swedish Mafia 2.0 without making enemies across the pond. Consider this trade. Hronik to Vegas for McNabb and Vegas's first and second in 2021. I don't think they pay that much for Hronik.
I don't know if I do it if I'm Detroit either. Because even if Hronik settles in to be a second pairing defenseman, that's usually more than you could expect out of a late first round pick.
What's McNabb been like?
Guy.
Yeah. I don't know. Not a lot of offense there. Actually, no offense at all. Age 30. Yeah, that's a weird one. The first and the second is nice, but Vegas, that's going to be low first, low second, right? That's essentially second and a third.
Yep.
North
So basically, if we want to go by history of actual Red Wings draft picks, that's essentially Wallander and Sabrango.
Yeah. North Moto says Burt, Mantha, Rasmussen, Cholowski, and a second for Eichel. I don't think Buffalo says yes there.
Burt, Rasmussen, and what?
Mantha, Cholowski, and a second.
Yeah, I don't think they.
How many
they do
contracts can they take on?
I don't know. I think after the season Mantha's had and Bertuzzi being hurt, I don't think they even consider it. C-Not says, hey guys, Tampa's up against a cap with Nikita on IR, so he doesn't count against the cap. If he's healthy by playoffs, how can he play once he's healthy? Does Tampa have to make moves?
Nope. Playoffs, cap doesn't matter.
Yeah. And that's how they get around that. This is the old Chicago trick. Sam W. says, seems like rebuilds often come up at the end of a successful run or finally a blow up after years and years of not being able to get over the hump. In the case of the Wings, because of the circumstances, the Wings suffered a few years of steady decline and now are steadily adding draft capital and high-end talent. How do you think our somewhat unique circumstances or timeline affect the length and complexion of our rebuild? Detroit waited too long to start, which dragged out the whole ordeal. That's what my analysis is.
Yep. And that's pretty much all there is to it. The 25 years was nice, but the Red Wings would be a lot better off if that 25-year streak we reminisce on was 23 years.
Yeah. Stay Fresh Cheesebag says, hey fellas, I'm proud to be crowned master and champion bracketologist. That's right. Joseph Fournier is the winner of our March Madness bracket. We won't talk about how I did. Prizes to be doled out and decided soon. So congratulations to those who came out on top, especially Joseph. Congrats to Baylor. Never bet on Gonzaga ever. Congrats to Baylor, whose story from floundering program to national champs will someday become a movie. I appreciate Helm. He's been a fine fourth-line foot soldier for years and is positionally solid despite his complete offensive ineptitude. But at this point, any player to refusing to get the vaccine should be jettisoned into the sun by Helm. I saw that article and the headline was a little bit I saw what the headline said, this is why Darren Helm won't get it. And then I read into it and he was like, I've already had it and I'm hoping I still have the antibodies, and he just doesn't want his body to take the hit. Though I would encourage everyone who's traveling around to get it. It's not as egregious as I was made out to be in the headline, or at least that's what I thought.
I think the part of the article that bothered everybody when he basically, what he says, like, I'll consider it after the season or something.
He said, I'll look into it after the season. Yeah,
like, Darren, just say you're going to get it after the season and nobody would bat an eye.
Facial hair policies are antiquated and classist. Leave it to Lou. Also, in prep for the trade deadline, please list every trade ever. Aussie for Hall of Fame. Stay fresh cheese bags.
I feel like we're getting pretty goddamn close, just in hypotheticals instead of actual trades.
Michael Thompson says, had a few drinks during the second intermission and resumed season 3 of Drive to Survive and accidentally missed the first half of the third period tonight. After checking the score, I decided I was just going to stick to drinking in F1 after all. All right, folks, that is all for the trade deadline preview episode. We are going to be back with you on Monday, April 12th. So we're not going to be doing our usual Tuesday episode, but we are going to be moving to Monday our usual Sunday episode. We're going to be moving to Monday post trade deadline. So again, Monday, April 12th, 3 p.m. is the trade deadline, and we will be with you Monday night to recap it all. But for now, we'd like to thank all of our listeners. Thank you all who tune in. Any new listeners, welcome to the Winged Wheel podcast, and enjoy the ride. To those who have been here, thank you, and we're sorry. Our name level sponsors, the people who make this show go round: Arjun Shanker, Yves Bartel on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Brett Bailey, Terry, driver of Evans Folkwagen, Taylor Tadgell, Brendan M, Citizen High Five, Craig Kibble, Evans Fetish Incarnate, Greech, Hana Lee, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jacob Turner, Jake Kiefer, Jeremiah Dobo, Joe Santangelo, welcome, new name level sponsor, Kalen Wood, Cody Stark, Kyle Hashman, Luke Johnson, Matt McKay, Matthew M. Rice, R.A., Ryan Hubbard, Scott Martin, Zach Spring, Andrew Bohan, Sam Bankson, another former junior goalie turned golfer, Antonio Gracias, Connor Leightonen, Evans Bingo Card, Fine Crisco, Jeremy Brocker, John Evans, Joseph Minama, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Matt Keeler, Stan Olson, Stay Fresh Cheese Bags, Bracket Champ, Trevor Pevavar. Guys, you ready for trade deadline?
No.
Sure.
See everyone on Monday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.